Hey everybody, it's me, Raccoon. I'm back. Although I am still hard at work on the next big video, Joe Blackburn, game director of Destiny 2, just released a 15-minute long video on Twitter discussing the aftermath, fallout, whatever you want to call it, of last week's State of the Game blog post. And considering that I didn't cover that blog post in particular, except for a pinned comment on my Destiny video, I wanted to take a look at this video. I've already watched it. I'm going to rewatch it again as I make this vid, and give my thoughts on everything that Joe brings up, how Bungie is reacting to the community sentiment around the state of the game, and yeah, this is going to be pretty unscripted, pretty off the dome, way different than my previous two videos and the video that's going to be coming out in probably a couple days, so bear with me. This is my first attempt at doing something like this, and before I get into it, I just want to thank Joe in particular for giving this to the community. This is wildly out of left field. I don't know if I've ever seen a game director of any game try to pull something like this off before. And such honesty and transparency is really appreciated. As much as people want to be toxic lately, as much as people want a reason to complain, you gotta give credit where credit's due whenever somebody is willing to step up to the plate, take a beating, and genuinely try to make some change. So, huge props to Joe. I just want to say that, first and foremost, you're not going to get any harassing Bungie dev energy out of me from this video, so if that's what you're looking for, turn away. So, let's just get into it. Let's let Joe speak his piece.
Hey everybody, it's Joe, and I'm just here to check in on how Destiny's going. So a few weeks ago, we put about a state of the game communication that wasn't up to our standards for what y'all have come to expect for those kinds of communications. It didn't provide the high-level vision that we normally provide, and really and truly, a bunch of us were heads down working the final shape and weren't able to give it the sort of care and love that we normally put into these kind of communications. And that's nobody's fault but mine here on this. So I wanted to come in, talk to you all directly, and sort of give you an update on what we thought about the state of the game that we put out and what we think about Destiny as a whole. Now, this is going to be pretty different than normal. This isn't a highly produced sort of production. It's me in my office. It's not scripted. I've got a bunch of notes here that we're going to read through. And it's going to feel probably more like you're just in a meeting with me, which is going to be rambly, and we're probably going to mess up a few times. But really, I just want to go over where we're thinking about the game.
That was certainly one of the biggest head-scratchers surrounding the state of the game. Why would Bungie put out something that could be so polarizing that basically shifted the blame away from them for so many hot-button community issues? I appreciate Joe taking the blame for this, because it was almost certainly all on him. He is the game director. He decides what is published and what isn't. So, props to him for, taking the hit here. It shows a lot of humility.
So, what we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about the reveal coming out next week. We're going to talk about PvP. We're going to talk about armor. We're going to talk about our communication strategy. Those are the big ones. So let's just get right into it. Let's start with reveal. Next week, we're going to go out and we're going to show an awesome showcase for the final shape. We're really excited about a bunch of the content in there, but truly, that showcase is not a reaction to the state of the game last week. It's not a reaction to a bunch of the sentiment online, and it's definitely not a reaction to this video. It was recorded a while ago. I think I have a mustache in the video, and it's a pretty focused reveal. In the same way that the game itself is pretty focused. The final shape is focused on the light. It's focused on the enemies we've been setting up and the allies that you've come to know. It's not about a bunch of wacky new systems or wacky new themes coming into Destiny. Instead, we want to make an experience that's super easy for anyone who's ever played Destiny to come in and absolutely fall in love with the content that's before them. I think the other thing that's really important here to know, as I sort of look at my meeting notes, is that communication is built for a pretty wide audience, much wider than probably whoever is watching this video. So what we're not going to talk about is things like a big new Strange Coin refactor and Xur revamp that's coming out in the final shape. We're not going to talk about things like a refactor of HUD elements where we're making sure the buffs and the debuffs are more clear and you can tell what's happening in higher level combat. It's going to, again, really be focused on the story, really be focused on the location, and maybe we'll get into a little bit about how the live service of Destiny is going to change after the final shape.
This isn't a ton of stuff that we don't already know. Obviously, nobody's really expecting the final shape showcase to feature any extreme economy change information or anything like that. I also find it kind of weird how Bungie is still driving home this thing of like, oh, the final shape isn't going to be Lightfall, guys. Don't worry, it's not going to be Lightfall. The story is not going to be as bad as Lightfall's was. It's kind of weird. Obviously, I'm somewhat happy that Bungie is kind of acknowledging that Lightfall wasn't that great through this sort of communication, but also, can we please just move on? I do like the little things that he brings up here. Strange Coin Xur revamp seems neat. I don't really go to Xur anymore, so a reason to go to Xur would be pretty cool. And buff, debuff revamp on the UI seems really great. So, thumbs up there.
Following that showcase, Dan, our GM, and I are going to be on set, taking questions, dotting T's, crossing I's, or maybe the reverse of that, on what you've seen in the showcase. So we'll provide a little bit more clarity on what was shown, and we'll probably get into some ways that maybe our philosophy on the final shape or specific details might have changed over the last few weeks since we recorded the showcase. All right, I think that's it for reveal. If I'm looking at the sheet next, we've got PvP. So let's start with the state of PvP right now in Destiny. What have we been doing? What have we been focused on? We've been really focused on sandbox balance. So like a big focus of effort last year was just making sure that Strand came out in a good place and got to live sort of in harmony with the rest of our Crucible ecosystem.
This is probably going to be something a lot of people just glaze over to get to the juicier information in this video, but while I do appreciate Bungie's focus on sandbox balance, particularly in Strand not being super broken on release like Stasis was, at the same time, Destiny 2 PvP is always going to be unbalanced to a degree, and seeing so much focus go towards sandbox balance when there are other much larger pain points that Joe will address later in the video is a bit disappointing. While Strand definitely did release balanced, there were some other changes made to PvP that completely ruined the sandbox for a while, like airborne effectiveness, which was horribly, horribly received by the PvP community. That change was made in preparation for Strand, and it turns out nobody's really fighting in the air with Strand, so we kind of just went through a really terrible era of PvP sandbox feel just for the sake of balance of a subclass that wasn't even in the game yet. So again, while I appreciate their efforts here, there are better places it could have gone, in my opinion.
Aside from that, we've been focusing on putting up 2 weapon balances per season, one at the start, one in the mid-season. And we've been focusing on ritual updates to PvP, be this mode updates, point updates, reward updates at the beginning of each season. Finally, we flip over to our agenda. We've been focused on making 1 new map and a few reprises a year. Now, all that aside, I think it's fair to say this approach is not producing the Crucible that our players expect us. So what are we going to do? How are we going to change? First, let's talk about maps. It's clear that the sort of slow trickle of PvP maps isn't having the effect we want. And although it gets an injection of PvP maps every so often into the ecosystem, it's also forcing this like 1 new map a year means we're trying to build a map that has to do everything, which means it can't be good at anything. So next year, we're going to change our philosophy. Instead of a slow trickle of maps throughout the year, we're going to focus our effort into a single map pack that's free for everyone. So imagine new maps coming in one drop where we can make a bunch of new experiences that can all be good at specific things and adds a big variety in a single drop next year. Now, this is a shift from our strategy, so it's going to take us time to sort of understand the details of what we're putting out here and getting that out to y'all next year.
Now, say I'm huffing copium, say I am just a Bungie shill, I don't care. This is fantastic. This is fantastic news for every PvP player out there. It is blatantly clear that the one new map a year plan was not working. No matter who you ask, there is basically no good defense of the one new map a year plan, and Joe himself acknowledges that here. He says, even if we get out one new map a year, that restricts the ability for us to design a good map, which is something that I didn't even really think of too much. But yes, that's absolutely true. That's part of why Disjunction is terrible, is because it's trying to do too many things at once, and it ends up basically just defaulting into let's shoot each other down one lane, because that's all there is to it. The fact that the map pack is free as well is phenomenal, and kind of disproves some theories going on that Bungie only wants to update content that's paid so that they get money that way. That sort of theory was always kind of shaky to begin with, in my opinion. We'll have to see how many maps are in this pack when it's dropped, if the maps are actually good or not. But ultimately, fundamentally, this is a straight-up objective improvement over what we've been getting, and I have to thank Joe here because the response to this is pretty damn quick. Although, it cannot all just be positive credit given to Joe, because PvP players have been giving this feedback for literal years at this point. So the fact that we're just getting this now, come on guys, it could have been way faster without sacrificing basically the health of the entire PvP landscape. I am happy though. This is a great change. Don't get that twisted.
Okay, maps are great, but we still really believe that PvP is about the foundation, and new maps aren't going to solve a foundation. So, modes. First of all, I'm really excited about what's coming out in Season 22, first with Checkmate. Checkmate is a mode all about that sort of primary fire, basic weapon excellence of Bungie games, and being able to show that excellence in a PvP setting. It's what a bunch of our really marksman-style PvP players have been asking for a long time, since Destiny 1, and we're finally going to put a mode like that in the game. And I'm super excited for a bunch of those players to get that experience starting right away in Season 22. Next, we've got Relic. And so Relic is a different kind of mode, and it sort of is a building off of these experiments that we've been doing with things like Fortress or Eruption, where it's about this quality Destiny sandbox experience of your guns and your powers that escalates when you succeed in sort of a crazy mayhem-like experience. And we think the balance of those two things is a really great time to sort of spin away from other parts of the game and get the full spectrum of what Destiny has to offer. I'm really excited about things like Fortress, and I'm really excited that Relic is going to provide an experience like this that is both, fun for people that are really good at slaying out and also has these sort of high octane hijinks moments to it. But that's what we've already committed to. So let's talk about some new things that we think we need to do. One, we know we need to bring more of our modes into the core playlists. We've been putting a lot out in Labs. We've been putting a lot out in Iron Banner. And to be honest, there's a few obstacles to us putting these into our core playlists, be this VO or small bug level issues that we just were I don't know if we're ready. I think that has been blocking us from doing the right thing here. So we're going to take on some of that bug wake. We're going to take on a little bit of the jank, and we're going to say, no. This isn't worth us not putting into the mode. And so we're going to take some of these modes that we've been putting in Crucible Labs, that we've been putting in Iron Banner, and taking them and putting them into the core PvP experience that most of our players experience. We've also heard a lot about comp, and particularly about the way that we reward points in comp. So we want to take a new approach to the way that we're balancing points in comp. Right now, we think it's just weighted too much on your personal MMR versus the people you're playing against. And when you win or when you lose a game, it can be really unpredictable how many points you're getting. We're going to go to a simpler system where winning or losing just matters more. Finally, we want to get great modes like Countdown Rush into competitive and get modes that people are less excited about, like Rift, out of the rotation. Making that competitive experience more about the game modes that, our players enjoy.
When it comes to talking about modes, my brain kind of just shuts off automatically against my will a lot of the time. I don't hate new modes, I don't dislike the idea of new modes, but it's, again, one of those things like with sandbox changes that I think Bungie's been putting way too much effort into in regards to PvP. I do think what Joe talks about here is really good, though. I think getting really fun competitive modes into the competitive playlist, like Countdown Rush, I know a lot of people love Countdown. I think that's great. I think getting really trash modes like Rift out of there ASAP. I don't even know why Rift was in that playlist to begin with, to be honest. But I think that's good. I think that's a positive change. I'm also so glad that they are finally taking something from labs and putting it in the main game. I feel like we've had 20 billion labs for like Crucible and Gambit, and the only labs change that we've seen pushed to the main game is like Dominion Trials, which is just worse. So these are good changes. I just think people like PvE players who don't get invested in Crucible as much as I do might have a bit more say here. And from the people that I talk to, who are very frequent PvE players, they do seem to like the implementation of new game modes. So I think this is a thumbs up overall. Good. Cool.
Okay, so we've talked map strategy, we've talked modes. I want to talk one other effort we want to do here. We're going to bolster what we call a PvP strike team. Throughout Destiny development, we've built strike teams for efforts before. This has probably been sort of invisible to you all in the audience, but in moments like in between Curse of Osiris and Warmind, we built a strike team for Destiny investment. This team was sort of built around, hey, how can we make it more rewarding and more enjoyable to just get stuff in Destiny 2? This team built stuff very quickly, like what would eventually become the masterworking system. They also went through, knocked out a whole bunch of bugs, knocked out a whole bunch of quality of life issues. We're going to take the same effort and we're going to build a PvP strike team around the same principle, but have it focused on the Crucible. It's going to be led by PvP developers, and it has a really interesting playbook for how this works. And that's that first the team decides what they want to do. They as a team get together, say, hey, these are the changes we want to make. Those changes go through me. They go through our systems CD. And then when we say, yep, those are great changes, they immediately get communicated with you all in the community, right? So this will be going out in a TWID, going out in a Twitter post, or going out on Reddit, right? Just sort of some immediate blast, like, hey, these are the changes coming. And those changes get communicated even before they start getting implemented. And then we start getting implemented. We found this formula is a really successful way for us to be able to push through changes quickly into the community. And I think one of the most exciting parts about these strike teams is we build them based off of community feedback. So these strike teams are built from the ground up to look at, hey, what are the pain points that are hitting our community the most? And so all this list is going to be built and burned down from, hey, these are the big issues the PvP community is looking at in Destiny. All right, I think that's the end of the PvP part of our agenda, if I'm looking at our notes here.
This is, by far, in my opinion, the best piece of news given in this video. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one of the strike forces that we've actually seen in action was the weapons team strike force back towards the beginning of Beyond Light, when a lot of negative feedback was being given regarding the weapons sandbox and how weapons sunsetting just basically shrunk the total amount of possibilities in the game and the amount of player expression. So Bungie just put a bunch of people onto the weapons team for a bit to just really, really populate the game with cool new guns. I think that's sort of what they're doing here, and if that is, then we're in for a treat, because that was a fantastic decision made back then. If this strike force's one job is literally to just fix PvP, I think we're in good hands. we possibly couldn't be. We'll see what they choose to address and what they don't, but I'm very optimistic about this. I think Bungie will be able to deliver here. That being said, one of the main things that this strike force needs to be able to do, in my opinion, is to demolish skill-based matchmaking. I've talked about this ad nauseum in my previous video when I discussed Destiny with fellow players, with lapsed players. It needs to be removed. It is so unbelievably unhealthy for the state of PvP. It is not right to continually punish your best PvP players because your servers and your integrity is so bad that you can't feasibly have a working skill-based matchmaking system in the game that does the job that it's supposed to do. It needs to be removed, and I think that needs to be one of the top priorities of this new strike team. So hopefully that is on their list somewhere. But given the cadence that they've had in their communication regarding this, I don't have super high hopes for that, and I think the most that we'll probably ever get is just a really, really, really loose skill-based system, which is still not at all what we deserve.
I think we're now going to talk about armor. It's probably been a while since we talked about this part about armor, but we might have talked about it before. I want to start with just talking about armor visual categories in Destiny. So at the top, we've got what we call aspirational armor. This is stuff like raids, trials, dungeons. We want the armor that comes from these activities to be flashy, or to really talk about the core of what that experience is. It's really important that when players earn these armors, they feel proud, they want to wear them, they want to show them off in the tower. Next, we've got silver, right? This is armor that you can buy for the store for silver. It's important for us that this feels like it's sort of breaking the mold of what you could expect in a Destiny game. It's our place to experiment with stuff that's a little bit fourth wall breaky. And importantly, we want anyone that spends silver on armor to feel like, hey, it was worth it, right? Like I got my money's worth when I spent this armor. It was cool. Then we have what I call narrative armor. This is the stuff that you'll see in any sort of our marketing trailers. This is the stuff that you earn in the season pass. It's the stuff that you earn in the post game of a campaign. And it's really about driving home what that specific moment in time was. So in season 21, it's deep sea diver armor, right? In Witch Queen, it's a sort of weird paranormal detective armor. You'll see what it is in the final shape here in a week or so. But that armor for us is really about driving home this clear, consistent fantasy of oh yeah, I was there. I remember that time in Destiny. Finally, we've got rituals and blues. And this space has always sort of been about that core Guardian fantasy. What does the Guardian look like that you would imagine as sort of the stereotypical everyday Guardian, or the Guardian that you see on the front line? Maybe tragically a Guardian that tried to go into the portal of the Traveler and then gets cut up into a million pieces. This is that spot. And we need a lot of armor here to sort of flesh out those fantasies. Now, sometime in the middle of last year, we sort of reevaluated our priorities on armor. And we said, hey, we need to be spending more on the armors that people care the most about, the people that earn, that spend, that do all this so they can sort of get these armors in the game. So this is our PvP stuff in trials, our aspirational stuff in raids and dungeons, our narrative stuff. We thought we weren't consistently hitting the bar enough in those looks. And I think that since that initiative, we've been really successful in this. We've put out great stuff in terms of cowboy armor for Spire. We've put out awesome stuff in the Root of Nightmares raid, and we've put out a bunch of awesome armor sets for sort of a deep sea fantasy last season and Season of the Deep. Now, what we failed to do when we reprioritized, hey, where are our resources going, is communicate this to you. So we knew that when we made this change, we weren't going to be able to make a ritual armor set every single year. And we thought, okay, well, that's fine. We have a lot that fits this sort of base Guardian fantasy. But we should have communicated that out to you. And so, one, I'd like to say, this is not a thing that we're never going to invest in. We're investing in it again in the final shape. There's going to be a whole nother ritual suite of armor. And we're excited to sort of replenish that base Guardian fantasy. But just because we're doing that in the final shape year, that doesn't mean that we communicated this soon enough. So also for this year, we want to take an armor set that we were going to put in the Eververse, and we're saying, no. We should have communicated this earlier. It's really important that our fans can trust us. let's take this armor set that we were going to use in season 22 for the Eververse set, and let's say, no, it's going to be free, and we're going to put it as ritual rewards. So next season, before the end of the season, you should see a brand new armor set that you can earn through playing Strikes, Crucible, Gambit as like a ritual reward for doing this, a brand new armor look. Again, we're confident in our strategy going forward. We believe this is the right priority going forward, but also it's our responsibility to communicate this stuff sooner. So we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing by all the fans.
This is also really amazing. So if you didn't catch up on all that, it was a lot all at once. Basically, how Bungie designs armors is they have classifications for different armors, depending on if it's a dungeon set, or a raid set, or a crucible set, or a seasonal set. So usually you're not going to have an armor set that should look really flashy and has a bunch of particle effects. You're not going to have that in, the typical Guardian Fantasy core playlist set. They also believe that they have basically plenty of regular Guardian Fantasy armor in the game already, so that's why they haven't been doing a lot of ritual sets, and why they sort of went back on their promise of one ritual set per year. But since the feedback has been so overwhelmingly negative regarding this, they are instead taking an Eververse set that was supposed to be released next season, and they are putting that instead into the ritual playlists. So, thumbs up there. Joe even takes blame for the fact that Bungie did not communicate this to us earlier, so thanks to him. The one complaint I have here, though, is this should not really be an issue at all, and this type of goodwill move for a game that is so ridiculously monetized should not be like we're giving you guys this gift just this one time. Like, we should get this stuff more. This should be a more common thing to create goodwill between Bungie and the player base, because Lord knows we are not really on good terms right now, and anything like this at a greater frequency would go a long, long way.
All right, I think that's armor. Let's talk about comms. Okay, we've talked a lot about how the development team is very busy, and I think that although we really want to be focused on delivering great content to y'all and making sure that's our top priority, that doesn't mean our communications have to suffer. And so the first thing, we want to be talking to y'all more. But talking to y'all more, our number one priority, we have to keep our community members and our community leaders safe from the Bungie side. I don't want anyone that signs up to come work at Bungie and to talk to y'all about the game to have to worry about their personal safety. So we're going to keep using our branded accounts. You'll see these on Twitter, and you'll see these on Reddit, right? And we want to be using those accounts with more personality, going and talking to y'all more. The other thing is me. I play the game a bunch. And right now, I don't have a bunch of time to be writing sort of big, long blog posts like you would assume. But when season 22 rolls around again, I'm going to be in the game a lot. I'm going to be playing a lot. So what we want to do is commit to a few times next season and the season after. I'm just going to stream me playing the game. And you'll be able to come and talk to me. And it's not going to be reveal packed, but it is a great time to just be like, hey, check in with Joe. These are the things that we're feeling. Get his opinions on them. And hopefully, if I can get and play with some of our elite players, learn a bit more about the game. I learn a ton from playing with you all in the community about different builds that are exciting and different ways to roll. So I want to commit, get out there, play some PvP, learn from some experts, and play alongside all of you next season. All right, the only thing that I have left here is close. So I think that means my rambling on here today is over. Thanks so much for listening to this, for watching this. Really excited to see a bunch of y'all next week at the reveal. Bye.
Obviously, do not harass Bungie devs. That is psychotic behavior. I do not endorse that in any way, shape, or form. Bungie developers are normal human beings just trying to do their job. They love the game just as much as you do, just as much as I do. Please treat them with kindness and respect. I hope that by seeing Joe, just a normal guy, sit down and talk about this game that he is in charge of, that people realize that. I, for one, hope to tune into at least one of his streams in the near future. I think it's really awesome that he is getting out there and doing this type of stuff, trying his best to sort of make a better connection with the community as the game director. I think he's a really great game director, by the way. I think he's a likable guy. I think he knows a lot about the game. I just think Bungie's ideals and the community's ideals need to be more closely aligned. And I think him trying to take a more personal stance with the community here is really good. And I definitely see him and love that he is doing something like this. All of that said, though, at the end of the day, this was a really good video. I think it has a lot of great stuff. All the PvP changes, for the most part, seem great. The free armor set next season is awesome. I'm now a bit more excited for the showcase, thankfully. I'm not just all doomer now. So I'm going to be doing a video on that. Should be up a couple days or so after the showcase. Keep your eyes peeled. What I wanted to get to, though, I sidetracked a bit there. It is kind of depressing that the game has been allowed to get to this point, that we have provided our feedback so regularly and so loudly for so long that we finally had to get to a point where, like, a week before the showcase, we're having another formal communication from the game director apologizing for the last communication from the game director, because the game is in just such a sad, sorry state. Like, guys, I understand. Game development is ridiculously hard. I am almost done with my degree in it, and I have only worked on super tiny games projects. I cannot imagine how difficult it is to work on such a game like Destiny 2. But come on. This is by no means meant to be toxic. I just want it to be clear that while this communication was great, I'm expecting even more in the future. I'm expecting a lot more than this in the future. This is not by any means me going like, oh, you know, Final Shape is going to be peak, everything is forgiven, Bungie is just going to create the best future for Destiny possible, because the future is still extremely unclear. But this is a good starting point. I wanted to make a video on it because I felt it was pretty beefy. I want to wish everybody on the Bungie team good luck on Final Shape. Good luck in this last stretch. I am really excited to see how the final product turns out. I really hope it's everything that we want it to be and more. Keeping expectations in check. Yeah. Thank you for tuning in, if you did. I should have a really excellent video coming up in the next couple of days, so stay tuned for that. I've been putting a lot of effort into it. I've been sick, pushing through it. I want to get this out. Be sure to like if you liked the video, subscribe, stick around if you like me. Hopefully you like me, and I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.